Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're going to be learning a blot and a half, and we will not be learning tomorrow night as I will be out of town, and we will be learning a blot and a half as well Tuesday night. Then we'll be all caught up. 3 lines from the bottom. Yitzayin Amud Beis. Here we go. Tashma. We learned in a brisa. Sichacha ben Isarim shel Erez sheyesh behen arba. Let's say that a person was using boards of cedar as schach, and they are 4 tfachim wide. Divrei kol psula. It seems to be from this brisa, everybody holds that board would make for pasal schach. But ein bahen arba, if it's less than 4, so 3.8 tfachim wide of cedar wood, then Reb Meir posel, the Reb Yehuda machshir machlokas in the Tanoim. On the top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and this line is going to be the focal point of this brisa for us. Umod Reb Meir sheim yesh bein neser leneser kim lo neser, that if between the boards of 4 of cedar, you have a plank of cedar that's 4.2, then you have a blank spot which you fill in with kosher schach, and then another board that's 4.2. So if you have sheim yesh bein neser leneser, between the 4.2 boards, you have kimalo neser, a blank space, shemaniach psal beinen, you put kosher schach there, ukshera. Now that's difficult to understand, that if the boards are 4.2, they should be a psul, because we learned in our Mishnah that if it's 4.2, it should be puzzle. So it says the Gemara as follows. According to the Shita, like we saw, this was one version of Rab we saw on Shabbos, that he holds that schach puzzle is 4.2, and anything less than 4 is going to not necessarily be schach pasal. So because he says it's 4.2 amos, it's a large amount, so then mishum hachik shera, our case over here is kosher, when you have cedar plank and then kosher schach and then cedar plank and then that's fine, because everything is way less than 4 amos, it's only 4 tvachim. But according to the one who holds that really schach is pasal, even when it's in the middle of the sukkah, and even if it's only 4 tfachim, why would we ever have a shita to say that it's kshera? Namely, the top line that says Umod Reb Meir, that if you do cedar plank, kosher schach, cedar plank, but the cedar planks are 4.2. But according to the one who says that 4.2 is puzzle, how can you say here that it's kshera? That doesn't even make any sense. It's a great question. It says the Gemara 5 lines down, Yud Ches Amud Aleph, Amar Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, Hacha besukkah delo havi ala shmona metzumtzamos askinan. We're dealing with a nukimta. A nukimta is a very specific type of answer. And basically the answer works like this. No. This case is different because it's very particular. Why is this case particular? We're dealing with a sukkah that is exactly 8 tvachim. Says the Gemara as follows. The Yahiv Neser Upsal, V'neser Upsal. You have the following from one side of the sukkah. Mehai Gisa, you have plank, schach, plank, schach, plank, schach. Okay, that brings us to the middle. Plank, schach, plank, schach, plank, schach. And then from the other side, V'neser Upsal, V'neser Upsal. From the other side, Mehai Gisa, Dahavulu Shnei Psalim Be'emtza, V'ika Hechsher Sukkah Be'emtza. Yes, you're right. When it's 4.2, it's a big problem. But how is the sukkah structured? So from the outside, you have planks of wood, kosher schach, planks of wood, kosher schach, planks of wood, and kosher schach. In the middle, you have enough for a kosher sukkah. And because you have enough for a kosher sukkah in the middle under the kosher schach, even though the planks are more than 4 tfachim, it is still considered kosher, a very narrow answer, as it were, but it does help to get out of the problem. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, going back to a sugya we learned about. Remember, we spoke about yesterday on Shabbos that avir, that open space in a sukkah, is more chamor than schach pasal, because open space in a sukkah, avir is pasal with only shlosha tvachim, and schach pasal, actual schach that's invalid, is going to be pasal with 4 tvachim, according to those who hold tvachim. So it says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, avir shlosha b'sukkah gdola. If you have a space of 3 tvachim in a large sukkah, larger than the minimal size of 7 by 7, umiyatu, and then umiyato, you made it smaller. You took the empty space and you added stuff to it. Bein bekanim, that's kosher schach. Bein bishipudin, no matter what it's made out of, have a miut. That will minimize the sukkah. But b'sukkah ktana, where the minimum shiur is 7 by 7 tfachim, so then bekanim have a miut only if it is wood, kosher schach, that's placed in the avir, but bishipudim lo have a miut. Behani mili, and this only applies min hatzad. It only applies up against one of the walls. Aval ba'emtza, but had it been that the avir was in the middle of the sukkah, kligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina. This is a machlokes in the Amoraim between Rav Acha and Ravina. Chad amar yesh lavud be'emtza, v'chad amar ein lavud be'emtza. What a fascinating shaila. Let's say that you have in the very center of your sukkah a pocket where there is no schach. It's a square. and it is less than 3 by 3 tfachim. Let's talk in our metrics. Instead of it being 1 foot by 1 foot, it's 10 inches by 10 inches. Can you sit under that spot? Let's talk in halachic terms. Do we say lavud when the hole in the sukkah is dead center? Or do we only say lavud when it's approximating to a wall or to a floor or to a ceiling? Because here we have no lines of demarcation. It's a hole. So if it's right above me, I'm sitting in the middle of my sukkah, I'm looking up, and I see that there is a perfect square, 10 inches by 10 inches. Do we say lavud in the middle of a sukkah? Does lavud only work when there is a clear line of demarcation, such as a wall or a floor or a ceiling? That is a machlokes. Well,
side question. When
sure.
Lavud and it's good and it's near a wall, are you still not able to sit under that spot?
No, you are, because it's mamish sukkah. That's the halacha l'moshe misinai, is that it would count. So then even here where there's mamish hole, you could sit there no problem. Nobody's that skinny anyways, but still, I mean, nobody's actually like 10 inches by 10 inches. That doesn't really work. But in theory, it would be mutter to sit under that spot because it's lavud. It's all as if it's totally solid. And that would be the same thing by walls. Like if the wall is close to the ground, it's mamish a wall. It's a dofen. It has the same halacha. But here we don't have those lines of demarcation. So the Amoraim, they argue about this. We're 1/3 of the way down. Yesh lavud. Chad amar yesh lavud be'emtza. V'chad amar ein lavud be'emtza. And now we're going to look at the various marimakomos to indicate whether or not, or I should say as to why each of these opinions hold, yes, there is lavud in the middle of a sukkah, or no, there isn't. My time of demand amar yesh lavud be'emtza. What is the marimakom that supports the shita and the Amoraim that says yesh lavud be'emtza, that if you're sitting in the midst of your sukkah and there's a 10 inch by 10 inch hole right above your head, that you are still allowed to sit? There's a Tanya, because the Brisa writes, Korah, where let's go to Hilchos Shabbos. This is back to Maseches Eruvin. Korah, you have a beam, hayotze mikosel zeh ve'eno nogas bekosel acher. So let's say you have a case like that. You have your opening. You have your opening to your particular mavui, and it's too far apart. So what you do is you have a beam going from this purple edge here, but it doesn't quite make it to the blue edge, right? So the beam goes. It's long, but it's not long enough. So then what does the Brisa say about that? Almost halfway down, the Brisa says over there, v'chein, and similarly, that case, v'chein, shtei koros, if you have two beams, achaz yotze mikosel zeh, one coming out of the purple magnetile, v'achaz yotze mikosel acher, and one coming out of the other magnetile, v'eina nogos be'emtza, but there's less than 3 tfachim. Do we say lavud? That's a great sampling because it's not near the wall. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a similar case with common denominators. So the Gemara wants to know, does that work? And what does the Brisa say? That even though it's true that they're not touching, if pachos mishlosha eino tzarach lahavi kora acheres, then you don't need another beam. Beautiful marimakom. That supports the shita that says that in the middle of your sukkah, mamish, the middle of your sukkah, lavud still works. However, shlosha, if the gap between the two koros extending from our very, very open mavui are more than 3 tvachim apart, so then the Brisa is not willing to go that far, obviously. Tzarach lahavi kora acheres. So this is a very good marimakom to support the idea that lavud works even without the classical lines of demarcation of walls, floors, or ceilings. So what does the other shita do with this? V'idach. What is the dissenting opinion, the one who says that lavud doesn't work in the middle of the sukkah? What does he do with this brisa? Says the Gemara, "Ve'idach shiny koros derabanan." We've seen this answer already, that when it comes to the halachos of Eruvin, the whole sugya is derabanan. To violate the iser deoraisa of carrying on Shabbos, you got to be pretty brazen. It's not simple. You need to be in a place that's a definite reshus harabim. And according to the Gemara, there are a lot of parameters. It has to have a road that's mefulash, tezayin amos wide. It's mefulash from one beginning of the city to the end of the city. In Chicago, we have Western Avenue, which cuts the whole city. It's a very long. What'd you tell me, Dad? It was once like 150 miles. I think it's a very long street. It's a very long street. It cuts all the way through. But do we have a concentration of 600,000 Jews within a very tight, narrow spot of 12 mil by 12 mil, which is approximately a little bit less, 12 square miles? No, that's a lot of people. We don't have that kind of concentration. And maybe in New York City they do, but New York City, a lot of the poskim said it's an island, and the banks that go into the water off of Manhattan are steep enough. All of it to violate the Isser D'Oraisa is very difficult. This is all a Din D'Rabbanan. You're carrying in a Mavui. It's a Din D'Rabbanan. I'm not minimizing the Isser. I'm just saying that it's a lower level of Isser. So therefore, says the Shita that says that you're not allowed to use Lavud in the middle. Okay, you can't bring a Raya from the world of Eruv Chatzeros, from a Mavui. It doesn't even count. Okay, now halfway down, my time of demand damar ain lavud be'emsa. What's the mari makom that supports the shita that there is no lavud in the middle of a sukkah? So says the Gemara, this is a sugya of tuma v'tara ditnan. The Mishnah writes, Aruba shababais. Let's say you have a skylight in your house. Uva poseach tefach, and it is 1 tefach by 1 tefach. Tuma babayis. If there's a mace in the house, so because of tumas ohel, kulo tame, everything in the house is tame. However, mashe keneged aruba, that which is directly on the up-down axis, that which is directly underneath that aruba, the halacha is tahor, because it's there's nothing. It can go straight up to the shamayim. It's clean. Tuma keneged aruba. What if the mace is opposite the aruba? Remember, we know that tuma is, when it comes to a mace, is etzem kiseora. Even a very small amount of a person's bone could create for tuma. So under those circumstances, what if the tuma is keneged the aruba? Tuma babayis kulo tame. Masheg. Okay. Tuma keneged aruba. We're halfway down Yud Ches Amud Aleph. If tuma is keneged the aruba, if the mace or the body part that is directly under the aruba, under the skylight, then kol habayis kulo tahor, because there's no ohel above it. Right? There's no ohel. It just goes straight up, and the tuma goes straight up. You can't walk over it. But from the sides, no problem at all, and the stuff in the house doesn't become tameh. Says the Gemara, Ein be'aruba poseach tefach. What if it's a smaller hole? So the halachos don't change that much, but tuma babayis keneged aruba tahor. In that case, if it were to have been directly under the skylight, still tahor. Tuma keneged aruba, kol habayis kulo tahor. And if the tuma, sorry, I said that wrong. Sorry, tuma babayis. Yeah, tuma babayis keneged aruba tahor. Tuma keneged aruba kol habayis kulo tahor. Ve'idach, how do you answer that question? What do we see from here? We saw that the tefach al tefach is not considered lavud and closed, because if the tefach al tefach on the ceiling was considered closed, the whole house would have been tamei. But you said that if the mace was directly under the aruba, then the tuma would go up to the shamayim. Why don't we close it 1 by 1 tefach in the middle of the roof? So the Gemara therefore assumes, according to this shita, it must be that there's no lavud in the middle of a ceiling, or in the middle of a sukkah. So what does the other shita do with that? V'idach, says the Gemara, you can't learn anything from tuma v'tara. The rules are not normal rules. V'idach, says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down, shiny hilchos tuma dahachi gmiri luhu. This is a tradition that we have. Okay, whatever the shaila is here about the Mar Makomos, but the point is that tuma is a very unique halacha. Says the Gemara, Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai. Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai was giving shiur, and he gave shiur quoting basically our Mishnah, which we have on the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, which speaks about a hole that has a roof in it. And what does he say? Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai, Bais shenivchas v'sikech al gabav kshera, that if you have a house that has a hole in it and you put schach on it, then you're allowed to sit under that schach. So says the Gemara, Amar lefana Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, hold on 1 second. Rebbe, when you're giving shiur on this topic, you have to give all the rules. You can't just say if there's a hole in your roof, you can put on schach and it's a kosher sukkah. You forgot an extremely important parameter, which is that it has to be dofen akuma within daled amos from the wall. Rebbe, parish, when you're talking about this, kach pirish abba, we need to say exactly how my father learned. Arba amos psula, pachos me arba amos kshera. You left out a key factor. You can't just say if there's a hole in a roof that no, you have to, people don't know these halachos. You got to be clear when you're giving shiur from the pulpit, you got to be clear. So that's what he's saying. If you can't just walk around saying if there's a hole in the roof, it's kosher, you have to be able to say it's only if it's within daled amos. And then another halacha, Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai, avruma sharya. Avruma was a particular type of fish, and if you scooped up a whole bunch of fish, the halacha is you're allowed to eat them. You don't have to worry about other non-kosher fish being scooped up in this. Why? Before we get to the why. So Amar lefana Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi pushed back on this as well. It's not just about the avruma. It's not just about that particular kind of fish. Rebbe, when you're talking about this, you have to add in all the parameters to help someone understand the halacha. When you're speaking about this parish, you need to explain kach amar abba. This is what the halacha is that my father taught. Shel makom ploni asura, shel makom ploni muteris. It depends where the fish is coming from. Depends what you're talking about. Some types of water environments are more susceptible to kosher fish, as the Gemara will attempt to prove now, and some are less so. Kiha de Amar Abaye. This is similar to the halacha of Abaye. Hai tzachanta de Bav Nahara Sharia. This particular fish, which is in Bav Nahara, he gave a location. You can't just say that this fish is going to be kosher without any analysis if other fish are along with it. You don't know. you have to give a location. Some bodies of water are better than others. My taima. Why do we have to give the location? Ilema, if you want to say mishum derudife maya, because the water is moving quickly. The high dag tame and some non-kosher fish, kavan de leis le chuta shidra, because they don't have a spine, lo matzikayim, they can't withstand the pressure of the water. That's not a good argument. We see that even when there is a case of strong currents, that there are still tame fish in those places. That can't be the reason why we have such a din. Maya, you want to say that it's salt water, because some all dag tames don't have scales. That's not true. But a dag tame doesn't have scales because that's one of the Torah's requirements. Lo matzikai. You can't say that either because we see that there are fish that don't have scales that are able to be within these waters. Ella says the Gemara mishum de lo marbetinayu dag tame, that we're talking about a case where the dirt on the ground, the silt all the way at the bottom of the ground, is not a good environment for a dag tame to exist. This isn't. I'm saying this now, like I've studied biology and anatomy, like we have tens of thousands of different species of fish. What I'm wondering what they knew to say that a dag tame can't exist in this environment. I recently saw some type of show on fish that exist in the deepest parts of the world. These crazy looking animals that have see-through heads so they could roll their eyes up, see through their brain all the way up at predators above them. Things that we are not, it looked like it was out of the movies. These are real animals. I'm just wondering when they say all dag tames, they can't grow with this type of silt. I don't know how this would play out Lamaisa right now. Let me say this in halachic terms. Is this a halachic assumption that in this place, when the silt is in category X, therefore we can assume the fish there are kosher? So I don't know that we'd say that nowadays because not nishtana hatzvaim, but we know so much more about the species of fish and the environments in which they live. Either way, this was the concern of the Gemara and why Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi pushed back against Rabbi Huda Bar Ilai to say that when you're talking about the kosher fish, you have to say what environment it is, what body of water it was. Amar Ravina, v'ha'idna, and nowadays, to shavche, because the shavche will nahar Esan v'nahar Gamda lahasam asira. Now that the rivers of Esan and Gamda spill into one location, one of those locations was more kosher fish, one was non-kosher fish. So therefore, all of it's a mishkababel, and now we can't rely on that at all because all the water is connected. And therefore, we cannot be under the assumption that if you pull out, this is a great shiloh when it comes to tuna fish. This is a great shiloh because the way that they often capture tuna is they find a fish of tuna, they find a school of tuna, they cast a net. There's no other fish in there. So if you're a non-Jewish company and less than 160 by volume is a non-kosher fish and they grind it all up, so then it's batel b'shishim and a non-Jew is the one doing the bittul. If a Jew owns the company, that does not work. That does not work because if there's a Jew, we have a halacha and Shulchan Aruch that ein mevatlan iser lechatchila. You're not allowed to intentionally create a scenario of bittul. Let's say you like the flavor of cheese. So I'm going to put in a little bit of cheese in my cholent, 160, 1/100th. No, that's usher. Ein mevatlan iser lechatchila. You're not allowed. Only b'di'eved, after the fact. I stirred the cholent with my milchik spoon. That was a ben yomo. I just stirred. Fine, okay, fine. We'll be mekel, but it's a kula. We do not allow that intention. These are shilos by tuna fish companies when you're buying foods that are not sold whole like that.
Some people are not going to only buy it from Hamish tuna fish companies because they don't cut the fish unless they see the fins and scales.
Right, exactly. But again, when it's not Jewish, so this is why some of the poskim were very lenient on certain alcohols that required, certain types of glycerin, and not all the glycerins came from kosher animals, but because it was such a small amount, so it was batel. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, I think this is written in one of his chuvas in Igros Moshe, that he would not on his own drink them, only b'di'eved if he was in a scenario, or if he didn't drink it, the balabas would have been upset that he didn't have a l'chaim with them, then Rav Moshe would have had a l'chaim. But in general, he avoided them because he didn't want to partake at all. He didn't want to partake at all. It's a kula. I mean, it's mutter. It's not a kula. It's mutter, but he didn't want to be a part of that. But that's the greatness of poskim, that they can give out the psak and still be able to maintain that level for themselves. Okay, we are 2 lines from the bottom on Yud Ches Amud Aleph Itmar. Itmar, a statement always from the Amoraim. Sikech al gabe achsadra. We spoke about this in our Mishnah on the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. So the case of Sikech al gabe achsadra is where you have a chatzer, and where you have a bunch of houses, and all the houses dump into a chatzer in the middle area, and there are these awnings that come out from people's homes, and then you laid schach from awning to awning, and then all of the chutzner was covered that way. So this is the layout for those of you who are on Zoom. This is the layout of the. Does this work? Yeah, this works. This is the layout of the area, and this area over here, this house is over here, and what would happen is they'd open over here, and then there were awnings. So like there would be an awning from this house and an awning from this house, and they'd lay out slats from awning to awning, and then they would build schach in the middle. So is that space in the middle considered to be a kosher sukkah? Yes or no? That's the Gemara's question over here. That was our Mishnah's question on the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. So it says the Gemara, Itmar sikech al gabe achsadra, if you did that on top of the awnings, and the awnings were the types of awnings, sheyesh laptzimin, they had support beams, so then, kshera, then the halacha is that sukkah is considered to be kosher, the sukkah that is within the chater, right? Because that's where the sukkah was built. That's where the schach was put. She'ein laptzimin, but if there were no pillars, so then, Amar Abaye kshera, Abaye Omar Kshera, Rava Amar Psula. Then we have a machlokas in the Amoraim. And here we're going to be introduced more formally to a very important halachic idea, one that requires a lot of time in the Rishonim to understand exactly how it works. We'll stay simplistic here due to time constraints, but Abaye Omar Kshera, why does Abaye say that this sukkah is kosher? Because he says that when you have your chutzner and the awnings are into the chutzner area, he relies on the following, top of Yud Ches Amud Beis, Amrin and Pitikri Yored V'Sosem. Pitikri Yored V'Sosem is, let's say that you had this magnetile right here, and there are 4 posts standing down, no walls. So the halacha is Pitikri Yored V'Sosem, we halachically imagine that the walls drop to the floor. It's a din d'oraisa. It's a halach l'mosh misinai, I believe, and that we assume that pitikr yord v'sosem, that the walls actually fall down. So when you have your awning, and your awning is partway into the chutzner, and your other person's awning is partway into the chutzner, and there's schach in between the two, so we say pitikr yord v'sosem over here. Here's one of the walls of the sukkah. Pitikr yord v'sosem over here. That the mouth, pitikr, the mouth of the tikra of the ceiling is yored v'sosem. It goes down and seals off like it's a wall. Right? So that's what Pitikr Yord V'Sosem means in simplistic terms. And that is why Abaye was of the opinion that in this case of the Achsadra, where the awnings that fed from the bottom into the Chater, and then Schach was put on top, that's why he said it was mutter. Rava, however, Rava Amar Psula, Lo Amrin Pitikr Yord V'Sosem. We don't say it over here. Amar Le Rava Le Abaye. Rava asks Abaye a great shaila. He says as follows. Let me get some green schach. Here you go. Let's make it a 3-wall sukkah. What? Mehudar. It's definitely schach puzzle. But, okay, so it says the Gemara as follows. This is the question of, it's green, yeah. Amar le Rava le Abaye. Rava says to Abaye, you hold the pitikr yord v'sosem? So let's say the following happened. You had a 3-walled sukkah, and then you took out one of your walls. You took out the wall that was in the middle. And what are you left with? A 2-walled sukkah, parallel sides. So that's the case that he said. According to you who holds pitikr yord v'sosem, that the ceilings just drop to the floor. You have a 3-walled sukkah. You remove the middle wall. You can literally see straight through. You're still going to say pitikr yord v'sosem? Let's ask the question the right way. How far, Abaye, do you take pitikr yord v'sosem? Do you even say that this sukkah, which now only has 2 visible walls, but no, pitikr yord v'sosem, don't worry, it's still kosher? Abaye says, no. I'm asking that there's an idea of pitikr yord v'sosem. It does not go this far. Amar le modina lach behahi. Abaye says to Rava, I agree with you in that case. I agree with you because if you do it this way, where you have your schach, but only 2 walls that are opposite one another, parallel one another, that looks like a street. That doesn't look like a sukkah. That's not a sukkah. And there he would not say pitikr yord v'sosem. Oh, fascinating idea. So there are limitations. Lema, maybe we should say that Abaye v'Rava, the machlokes that we just saw about pitikr yord v'sosem, maybe we should say that it is similar. B'plugta, the Rab v'Shmuel. Remember, Abaye and Rava are 4th century. And Rab and Shmuel were earlier, 1st and really part of 2nd century of the Amoraim. So then maybe we should say that machlokas has been plugged to the Rabbi Shmuel Kemiflage. Why? Because the Itmar, the Amoraim, spoke out a case in regards to Hilchos Shabbos. What was the case? Itmar Achsadra Bibika. This case of Achsadra Bibika, you've got a roof and 4 posts. That's all you have. Are you allowed to carry under it? A roof and 4 posts? Hilchos Shabbos, not Hilchos Sukkah. So let's see. Rav Amar Muta L'taltel B'kula. Rav says you can carry in that gazebo. It has a roof and 4 posts. De Amrinan Pitikr Yord V'Soseim. Ushmuel Amar Ein Metaltelin Bo'el B'Dalet Amos. You have your regular rule as if there's no roof at all. And what do you get when you're stuck in the middle of nowhere? Dalet Amos. So it's as if there's no gazebo there at all. So it seems to be that machlokes overlaps because there Shmuel would say 2 lines from the bottom, De Lormin and Pitikr Yord V'Soseim. Says the Gemara, maybe we should assume that the machlokes that we just saw between Abaye and Rav in the 4th century of the Amoraim is really just an application of the earlier machlokes of Rav and Shmuel from 75 years ago. Says the Gemara, no way. Aliba de Shmuel, kule alma lo pligi. And this is a little bit of a challenging line. The words seem simple, but you really need Rashi here. We're not going to read it inside, but I'll explain it outside. What does Abaye hold? What does Shmuel hold? Shmuel held that in the case of Shabbos, that if you have your roof and 4 poles, he says there's no pitikr yord v'soseim. So if over here he holds it, there's no pitikr yord v'soseim, Rashi explains he definitely won't hold it in the case of the achsadra. Definitely not. Why? Because the awning that we are doing pitikr yord v'soseim for in the case of our Mishnah and Yud Zayin Amud Aleph was the awning was from the house, and we dropped a wall. What do we want the wall for? Not the awning, for the outside the awning. Says the Gemara, if Shmuel doesn't allow pitikra to work under its own wall for itself to carry under here, he's certainly not going to allow pitikra to build a fake wall over here for something outside of the awning. So that's why the Gemara says, Aliba de Shmuel, Kule Alma lo pligi. Everyone agrees that Shmuel would not carry over this halacha back to Hilchos Sukkah, to our case of Achsadra Ki Pligi. Where would Abaye and Rava argue? Only within the Shita of Rav. Kipligi aliba de Rav. What would the machlokes be? Abaye, who's of the opinion, as we saw, that pitikr is yord v'soseim, and Rav, who's of the opinion in Hilchos Shabbos, pitikr yord v'soseim, they are like one another. The Rava, what would Rava say? Rava Amar Lach, Ad Kan lo Amar Rav Hasam ela de mechitzos leachsadra hu de avidi. There, by Hilchos Shabbos, when we were talking about the achsadra that has 4 poles, what would we use pitikra for? For itself, to be under that roof, to be under that magnetile. That's what you're supposed to do it for. But aval hacha by Hilchos Sukkah, in this strange case that we write the picture of the magnetiles, where you have the batim and the chutzner in the middle and the awnings, and from one awning to another, you put up all the schach. Aval hacha the lav lahache avidi, the walls that the pitikr yod v'soseim walls in the case of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph in our Mishnah. It's not even under that roof. It's meant to be external. That wall is being used for something separate of the awning. So that's how Rava would say that there is no such machlokas. But the Gemara says we have a problem with the sheets of Abaye. Abaye said pitikr yord v'soseim. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. If Abaye is right that there's pitikr yord v'soseim, then our very Mishnah is a big problem. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, v'chein chatzer hamukefes achsadra. And if you look back in the context on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, what did we see on the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph? We said at the very top line of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph that hirchikes asikuch min adafana shlosha tvachim psula, ... 4th line, and that's psula, v'chein chatzer shimukefes achsadra. It's psula. But according to Abaye, if there's an awning, why don't we say pitikr yord v'soseim? It should be automatic. So by virtue of the fact that our Mishnah says it's psula in the case of achsadra, doesn't entertain it, seems to not work. So that's a kasha in the Gemara. Tanan, says the Gemara, 4th line, Yud Testament Aleph, Tanan, the Mishnah writes, v'chein chatzar mukefes achsadra, there our Mishnah implied that it's puzzle. But ve'amai, if you're Abaye, then why doesn't our Mishnah assume, Neimad, our Mishnah should have said that it's mutter because of pitikr yord v'soseim. But our Mishnah doesn't say that, kasha and Abaye. So answers the Gemara, and this is some beautiful achdus where the dissenting opinion supports the person who's being questioned. Says the Gemara, Tir Gemara Rava Aliba de Abaye. Rava says, no, I know what Abaye meant. Beautiful to see this when you're in a machlokes. Great way to lower the temperature in a machlokes is to support the. I hear what you're saying. There's a Mishnah that says like you, right? So that's what's happening here. So the Gemara says, how can Abaye fit with our Mishnah? Our Mishnah doesn't use in pitikr yod v'soseim when it could have or should have. So Rava says, in order to explain Abaye, kishehishve es kiruyo. So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about a case where you have your awning that's sticking out. And what have we been speaking about so far? You take a piece of wood, you put it on top of one awning, you extend it across the yard and put it on top of another awning. But if there was a way to set it up where the schach was shove. It wasn't on top of, it was literally the same exact height. The schach that you put in was not above. The schach that you put in was literally equal. So that's what the Gemara says is the answer here. That's what Rava says. And the Gemara says, Tirgama Rava aliba de Abaye kishehishve es kiruyo. When the schach is exactly the same height as the awning, even Abaye would say that there's no particular Rava association. That's our Mishnah on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. And that's how Rava explains Abaye in order to make sure he still fits in our Mishnah. Now, Besura, in the city of Surah, Masni Lahashmaisa B'hai Lishna. Everything we just saw was how this whole sugya was taught in the city of Surah. However, and we've seen this templating before, in Pumpadisa things were different. But Pumpadisa Masni, they taught the following, much different than we just saw. Sikech al gabe achsadra she'ein la p'sim divrei kol psula. This is already different. That if the awnings that are in the chatzer, and on those awnings, the schach is extended from one awning to another, if there are no posts holding them up, then divrei kol psula. But yesh la p'simin. But if in fact there are posts, so then that's where we have our machlokas Abaye amar kshera, Rava amar psula. This is very different than our initial framing of this conversation, because if you look at the very bottom of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, it's not like that. We said that if there are p'tzimin, it's kshera, and if there's no p'tzimin, there's a machlokas. And here we're saying that if there's no p'tzimin, it's puzzle. So there's a whole different framing here. Abaye Omar kshera. Why does Abaye say that if there are p'tzimin, if there are posts, it's kasher? Because all the posts are presumed to be close together, and amrin on lavud. So we assume that there are standing posts, right? Like we have this in our backyard, that we have a porch, and all of the uprights on the porch are very close to one another, so that even a kid can't fit their head between there. It's like 3-4 inches for sure. That's lavud. That's a solid wall in halacha, no question about it. It's breezy, but it's a solid wall. So that's why Abaye says that if there are p'tzimin, if there are posts that are close to one another, that would be kosher. That would be a valid wall. But Rava Amar Psula Lo Amrin and Lavud. We don't say Lavud in this case. However, says the Gemara, B'Hilchasa Kilishna Kama, this version in Pumpadisa was incorrect. And the appropriate version is the version that we learned on the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Aleph and wrapping over to the top of Yud Ches Amud Beis, to say that the machlokes is where there are no p'tzimin. That's where the machlokas actually is. Okay, very good. Says the Gemara, let's apply this conversation that we've just been discussing to a story. Rav Ashi, Ashkeche le Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi saw that Rav Kahana was the kamesakech al gabe achsadra. He was using an achsadra to hold up some of his chach, she'ein lo p'tzimin. And there were no posts on that p'tzimin. So that can't be version 2 in Pumpadisa. It has to be version 1, because version 2 says that everyone agrees that it's possible if there's no p'tzimin, if there's no posts. So Amar Le, Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, Lo savar mar. I don't understand, Rav Kahana, you don't hold according to Hada Amar Rava Yesh la p'tzimin kshera ein la p'tzimin p'tzula. You don't hold of that. So he says, Ach vele, he showed him where the posts were. Nira mi bifnim v'shava mi b'chutz, inama nira mi b'chutz v'shava mi bifnim, that we're talking about a case where the posts were in a very specific spot. Again, a nukimta, a very chiseled out answer in order to get out of the case scenario, to show exactly how he felt about the machlokas. And it was really like version 1 of the machlokas in Surah, and not like version 2 in Pumpadisa. And how do we know that as long as this post is there, even if it can't be seen, that it's still kosher? Because of Maseches Eruvin. We're going to see this throughout the Masechta. We're going to keep on reaching back in the annals of our learning to say that we've learned this before. And how do we see that here? 1/3 of the way down, a little more Yud Tes Amud Aleph to Itmar, right by the picture. What do we know? That nira mi bachutz v'shava mi bifnim, that if the lechi that a person is using is visible from the outside, but you can't see it from the inside, the halacha is nidon mishum lechi, but lechi hainu p'tzimin. As long as it can be seen somewhere as a heker, you're good to go. And so too over here, as long as you can see the p'tzimin somewhere. So the halacha is that it does count, and a lechi is similar to the p'tzimin. They're very similar. So halachically, that is considered acceptable. Okay, we're going to totally change gears now. This sugya will take us to the Mishnah on the top of Yud Tes Amud Beis, and then we'll stop for the night. The Mishnah is actually a Tosefta, halfway down at the 2 dots. We learned about this idea before. Tana, we learned in a Tosefta, Psala yotze min Succah nidon kesukkah. If you have psal, this is kosher schach. I know it's confusing because normally it's puzzle, but when it's written like this, psal, from the word psoles, it is the parts of the grain that are not the grain, and that's kosher for schach. That's why it's called psal. So if you have a kosher schach that extends beyond your sukkah, well, we'll have to see exactly what it means, and it's treated like sukkah. So my psala yotze min sukkah, we're going to see 4 different answers in the Amoraim. Here's answer number 1. Amar Ula, kanim hayotzim la'achorei sukkah. Let's say you have bamboo. and you're using bamboo as your schach, and it extends beyond the back of your sukkah. Let's assume you have a 3-wall sukkah, and it's extending beyond the back center wall of your sukkah. Under those circumstances, we would say that the sukkah is still kosher. Asks the Gemara, how is it kosher? But behind your sukkah, the 3 walls surround you. If the bamboo shoots are extending over the back of your sukkah, so then what good does that do? That doesn't help anybody. So let's say your sukkah is sideways, okay? So the schach is hanging out over the edge, but there aren't 3 walls. There says the Gemara, don't worry, b'de'ika. Really, there are 3 walls. We need the sukkah to be a minimum size, 7 by 7. If it's not big enough, it's not kosher. Says the Gemara, b'de'ika. Don't worry, it's big enough. So says the Gemara, we need it to be that the schach is thick. It needs to be more shade than sun. Says the Gemara, b'de'ika. So says the Gemara, effectively, what you're saying is that you have 2 sukkahs, one right next to the other. You have one sukkah in which you're sitting, and you have the schach overlapping into the back one. Congratulations, that's a kosher sukkah. What is the big deal there? So it says the Gemara, that's just regular halachos of sukkah. You've got 3 walls, you've got kosher schach. It's very simple. It says the Gemara as follows. Mahu detema. You might have thought that since the schach that was over the original sukkah was ulegavoy avidi, that it was really meant to cover me and my original sukkah. But externally, vilavroi lo avidi, but the schach was meant for sukkah over here, but not this sukkah. So because in my brain, this is the schach, this is the sukkah that I sit in, sukkah A. So, okay, there happens to be bamboo that sticks out and happens to be kosher. So what? That's not my sukkah. So the Gemara says, Ma'u detema, you might have thought that since it was ulagava, your intention was for sukkah A and not lavroi, not for the external second sukkah, sukkah B, havamina, that it might not have been kosher. Emalo, kamash malan, that's not true. That's answer number 1 of Ula. Answer number 2. Rabba v'Rav Yosef Amrei Tarvaihu. Hacha b'kanam ayotzim lifni mina sukkah. Here, we're not talking about bamboo that's sticking out past the back of your sukkah. We're talking about bamboo that's sticking out over the front opening of your sukkah, 3 walls, and the bamboo sticks out over the front end of your sukkah. Now, for sure, there's no walls there. So says the Gemara as follows. Umashcha ve'azla chada dofen behadayu. So it's true that there aren't 3 walls, but one wall is much longer. So the schach does extend. But if you were to look down aerial, you'd only see part of one wall. Is that kosher? So says the Gemara, according to these 2 Amoraim, that's psal hayotze min sukkah nidon kasukkah. It's mutter to sit under that space. And that's what they say. And says the Gemara, Rabba v'Rav Yosef Amar Tavei Hacha b'kanam ayotzim lifnim min hasukkah mashcha v'az lachada dofen behadayu ma'u detema. What might you have thought? Hales behechsher sukkah. You might have thought that there aren't enough walls. It's not the right shiur. Kamash malan, that you're allowed to do that. This seems to be a valid answer. That even though you're not surrounded by 3 walls, this would be the anomaly, right? It's very rare to be in a sukkah that doesn't have 3 walls and to say that it's a kosher sukkah. But here we say that it's a kosher sukkah. I'm asking this question on my own. Are we saying pitikr yod v'sosem on the schach on the other sides? Here you have your sukkah. This wall ends short, and the wall extends over here. The schach's hanging over. You only have one valid wall. Do we say pitikr on the schach? I don't know. I'm just asking on my own. Okay. Answer number 3. We're 2/3 of the way down. Yud Testament Aleph. Says the Gemara, Rabba bar Barchana Amar Rav Yochanan lo nitzrach ela l'sukkah sheruba tzilsa meruba mechamsa. We're dealing with a regular sukkah. It might even have 4 walls, which don't drop off of the stender. It might actually be talking about a sukkah that has 4 walls, and you have perfectly, for the most part, perfectly good schach, except that it's a little spotty. Maybe the wind kicked up some of your schach, probably the leafy schach, and what are you left with? Says the Gemara that most of it's silsa meruba mechamsa. Most of the schach is concentrated enough that it's kosher where there's more shade than sun. But there's a small piece where the sun, where the wind blew a little bit, and that one spot is a little shvach. Says the Gemara, you might have said that this is going to be a big problem. You can't even sit under this. Kamash malan, that is totally fine. Says the Gemara, okay, I understand the case you're discussing, but why is that called psal hayotze mina sukkah? Nothing left the sukkah. All you're saying is that within your sukkah, it's a little spotty. Why is that called psal hayotze mina sukkah? Uma yotze. Says Gemara, yotze mehechsher sukkah. It's not yotze physically. It's yotze halachically. That section appeared to not be kosher. Kamash malan, that we're not concerned. 4th answer, 8 lines from the bottom of Yud Testament Aleph. Rav Oshia Amar lo nitzracha ela l'schach pasol pachos mishlosha. This sukkah katana. What are we talking about? We're talking about a very small sukkah, 7x7, and there's schach pasel that's 2.8 wide. Umay yotze, fine. You want to say that that's kosher? I understand why you would say that. Umay yotze, what does it mean yotze? Yotze mitorah sukkah. We would have thought that this was yotze mitorah sukkah, and it's in fact not. So maskif lo ravoshi. Hold on one second. Lo yehei ela avir. Why would we not use this case even with open schach? Open schach, we said, is more chamor, as we started with today, because open schach is pasel for only 3 tvachim, and schach pasel is pasel by 4 tvachim. So says the Gemara, ve'avir pachos b'shlosha tvachim b'sukkah tana mi pasel. That's not pasel. That's not pasel at all. So Amar le Rabbi Abba zemit staref v'yeshenim tachtav. Says the Gemara, don't worry. We're still going to be able to keep our party line of which is more chamor. The avir, the open space is more chamor because its level of psul is more strict. It's smaller, 3 tvachim. And if you have that, even in a very small sukkah, you're not allowed to sleep under it. Masha'enkin, if it's schach pasel, you are allowed to sleep under the schach pasel as long as it's 3.8 and not 4 tvachim. That's considered acceptable. Says the Gemara, Umi kamidi, is there such a scenario? Do we have a precedent where something is like the avir and the rest of the schach, where you're not even allowed to sleep under the avir? That means that they can't mesh together. If the avir is something you can't sleep under, and the rest of the schach is kosher, you can combine it to have 7, but you can't sleep under the schach. That doesn't make sense. Why would that be allowed? Would there be a case scenario whereby you have if you have a combination, but under the avir pasal, you're not even allowed to sleep there? Says the Gemara, yes, we do. By mikvah, absolutely we do. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben El Yoshiv. Never seen this name in Shas before. That's because I've never learned Shas before. But the Gemara says that in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak ben El Yashiv, we do have this example. Turning to the top of your Testament Beis, and with this we will close. We have a case of a mikvah. This is quoted in Maseches Vachim. If you have a mikvah that's mostly filled, we know we need 40 sa for a kosher mikvah. And let's say that you have 39 sa of water. And the last sa is tit hanirok. You have this very liquidy type of mud. So says the Gemara, Yochiach, we can bring a proof from there, that does help to fill in the gaps. However, v'hatovel bo, but if you were to jump into a mikvah of just liquidy mud, lo also lo tvila. So we do have a precedent whereby we have a combination of 2 things, where that thing in and of itself would be puzzle. The mud, the liquid mud, you cannot go to the mikvah there, but we do count it as the 40th sud, just like in our case, where we have avir, open space, which is chamor and pasal. You can't sleep under it, but it is mitzaref and a sukkah katana to be part of the 7. We'll stop right here. No shiur tomorrow. Yes, shiur tomorrow night. No shiur tomorrow. Yes, shiur Tuesday night, blot and a half. Wednesday, 1 blot. Thursday, blot and a half by your home. Looking forward to that. And I think we'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Someone sent me a text.